One wrong move, and two FBI agents turn a simple arrest into absolute chaos. Kevin and Marcus Copeland storm a convenience store disguised as Cuban criminals, only to discover their suspects are innocent ice cream sellers. The real dealers escape, their boss explodes, and suddenly the brothers are one mistake away from losing their badges. Their last chance sounds easy. Protect spoiled hotel heiresses Brittany and Tiffany Wilson on a trip to the Hamptons. Easy. Until a roadside accident leaves the sisters scratched, furious, and refusing to appear in public. Silence. Kevin looks at Marcus. Marcus already knows that look. Their careers are collapsing, the mission cannot fail, and Kevin has just imagined a plan so ridiculous it might actually work. Hours later, Kevin and Marcus disappear beneath layers of pale makeup, blonde wigs, blue contact lenses, and enough prosthetic skin to fool almost anyone. Almost. Marcus stares into the mirror, horrified. Kevin smiles. Their new identities are Brittany and Tiffany Wilson. At the Hamptons Hotel, every step becomes a test. Their voices crack, their heels wobble. One suspicious glance could destroy everything. Then the Wilson sisters' friends rush over, dragging them into gossip, shopping plans, and a social war with the cruel Vandergeld sisters. Kevin adapts fast, but Marcus is trapped inside tight clothes, aching feet, and a nightmare he cannot escape. Then basketball star Latrell Spencer sees Marcus across the room. He freezes and smiles. Marcus thinks the disguise is failing. The truth is worse. Latrell is completely, dangerously fascinated. Latrell begins following Tiffany everywhere, showering Marcus with compliments that feel more like threats. Marcus tries to repel him with terrible manners, awkward poses, even exaggerated disgust, but Latrell only falls harder. Meanwhile, Kevin spots Denise Porter, a sharp reporter, investigating the wealthy Vandergeld family. For the first time, the ridiculous disguise offers him something tempting. A chance to get close without revealing who he really is. But the brothers' fake lives are tightening around them. Their new friends confess heartbreak, jealousy, and insecurities, trusting Brittany and Tiffany with secrets meant for real women. Marcus starts seeing the pain beneath their perfect clothes and expensive smiles. Then Latrell announces he has arranged a private date with Tiffany, and Marcus has nowhere left to run. Marcus turns the date into a disaster on purpose. He chews with his mouth open, orders mountains of food, and behaves so wildly that any normal man would run. Latrell doesn't. He watches Tiffany with dreamy eyes, convinced he has found the perfect woman. Across town, Kevin secretly removes his disguise and meets Denise as himself. Their chemistry grows, but so does the danger. He learns her investigation points toward Warren Vandergeld, the powerful father hiding behind money, charity, and a flawless reputation. Then the brothers uncover something worse. The kidnapping threat was never random. Someone close to the Wilsons has been feeding information to the criminals, and now the agents realize the trap may already be inside the hotel. The pressure closes in from every direction. Marcus's wife, Gina, sees photographs of him with another woman and believes he is cheating. The real Wilson sisters threaten to return. Denise keeps digging into Warren Vandergeld's collapsing fortune, unaware that Kevin is using a false identity to stay near her. Then the brothers discover the truth. Warren is drowning in debt, and kidnapping the Wilson sisters is his escape plan. At the charity fashion show, the lights blaze, cameras flash, and wealthy guests applaud, while armed men quietly move into position. Kevin and Marcus know the attack is coming, but exposing themselves too soon could ruin the case. Then the real Brittany and Tiffany walk into the hotel. Two sets of Wilson sisters, one room, and the kidnappers are already watching. Chaos erupts. The kidnappers seize the wrong sisters. Kevin and Marcus tear off their wigs, and the ballroom explodes into screams. Guests scatter beneath flashing lights as the brothers chase Warren's men through the hotel. No more heels, no more fake voices. Just two agents fighting to finish the mission they nearly destroyed. Marcus throws himself between Gina and danger, finally proving that every lie was part of the case. Kevin reaches Denise and admits the truth, but there is no time for forgiveness. Warren corners his own daughter, using her as a shield while his perfect public image collapses around him. Then Kevin raises his weapon. One shot could end everything, but Warren is holding the one person nobody expected him to sacrifice. Kevin hesitates. That second gives Marcus room to move. He lunges, knocks Warren's gun aside, and the brothers bring him down as agents flood the ballroom. His daughter is safe. The kidnapping plot is exposed. The case that nearly ended their careers now saves them. Then come the harder confessions. Gina finally understands why Marcus disappeared behind the disguise. Denise knows Kevin lied, but she also saw him risk everything to protect her. Latrell discovers the woman of his dreams was never a woman at all, and his stunned silence says everything. By morning, the wigs are gone. The badges remain, and the friends they deceived still choose them, not as heiresses, but as two men who told the truth. Most directors would have looked at White Chicks and seen a reputational disaster waiting to happen. Two black male comedians disguised as wealthy white women, surrounded by racial jokes, gender jokes, bodily humiliation, and enough prosthetic makeup to make basic facial movement look exhausting. Keenen Ivory Wayans saw something else, a perfect Wayans family comedy machine. The danger was part of the attraction. By 2004, Keenen had spent years building a career around ideas that sounded indefensible in a studio meeting, but became strangely accessible once filtered through performance, exaggeration, and absolute commitment. White Chicks was not designed to behave politely. It was designed to charge straight through discomfort until resistance turned into laughter. That instinct had defined Keenan's work long before the Wilson sisters arrived in the Hamptons. He made his feature-directing debut with the blaxploitation parody I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, then created In Living Color, the sketch series that gave black performers and writers room to attack celebrity culture, racial stereotypes, television respectability, and one another. He later directed the first two Scary Movie films, transforming horror conventions into rapid-fire, vulgar comedy. By the time White Chicks entered production, Keenen had developed a recognizable method: take a familiar piece of popular culture, push its defining features toward absurdity, and never let good taste interrupt the joke. The original spark, however, came from Shawn Wayans. He recalled reading about celebrity sisters Paris and Nikki Hilton, whose public image represented a very specific early 2000s phenomenon: young, wealthy socialites becoming famous, partly because cameras followed them everywhere. Shawn reportedly imagined himself and Marlon playing women from that world. That single visual joke contained the entire movie in miniature. Two brothers known for elastic physical comedy would have to study the voices, attitudes, friendships, vanity, and social rituals of privileged white women, then distort those observations just enough to become ridiculous without becoming completely unrecognizable. Keenan's contribution was turning that sketch-sized idea into a studio feature. The screenplay ultimately carried 6 credited writers, including Keenen, Shawn, Marlon, Xavier Cook, Andrew McElfresh, and Michael Anthony Snowden, while Keenen, Shawn, and Marlon also served among the producers. Revolution Studios backed the project, with Columbia Pictures handling its theatrical release. That concentration of creative control mattered. This was not a case of performers being dropped into somebody else's concept. The Wayans brothers were shaping the premise, producing the environment, and protecting the tone from the inside. The film's official credits reveal something closer to a family-operated comedy workshop than a conventional director-for-hire production. And Keenen directs it like a feature-length sketch, but that description is not an insult. Sketch comedy depends on immediate character definition, escalating behavior, memorable entrances, and performers who understand that hesitation kills momentum. White Chicks follows exactly that rhythm. The plot about FBI agents protecting kidnapping targets provides structure, yet Keenen treats it primarily as a delivery system. Each new location introduces another comic arena: the hotel, the boutique, the nightclub, the beach, the restaurant, the charity event. Story logic keeps the characters moving. Social collision creates the comedy. The mystery is almost secondary because Keenen understands what the audience actually came to watch: Marcus and Kevin surviving one impossible impersonation after another. His visual approach also protects the central illusion without pretending it is flawless. The disguises are intentionally unsettling. Their faces appear smooth, enlarged, and faintly artificial. Their movements cannot fully match the identities they are performing. A more realistic film might have hidden those limitations through shadow, restrained acting, or cautious framing. Keenen does the opposite. He places Shawn and Marlon in bright rooms, surrounds them with actual white women, and lets the physical mismatch become part of the joke. The audience never truly forgets who is beneath the makeup. That dramatic irony creates tension in every interaction because we are constantly waiting for someone inside the story to notice what seems painfully obvious from outside it. This is also where Keenan's directing reveals more calculation than the film's chaotic surface suggests. The comedy targets race, masculinity, femininity, wealth, beauty standards, friendship rituals, and elite social behavior, but it rarely pauses to announce a serious argument. Instead, it weaponizes reversal. Black men enter spaces built around white privilege. Male characters discover how women are judged, pursued, dismissed, and expected to perform attractiveness. Wealthy socialites are mocked as shallow, yet their friendships eventually receive more warmth than the FBI partnership at the beginning. The satire is inconsistent, occasionally crude, and never subtle. Still, beneath the screaming and slap fights sits a director fascinated by identity as performance. Keenen Ivory Wayans did not approach White Chicks as realism, and judging it by realistic standards misses the design. He built a live-action cartoon in which disguise becomes social permission. Permission to enter another class, another race, another gender presentation, and another style of comedy. The film works whenever that commitment becomes so complete that embarrassment stops mattering. But a fearless directing concept still needs a screenplay capable of stretching one outrageous image across 109 minutes. And that blueprint would demand far more construction than the finished chaos suggests. But a fearless directing concept still needs a screenplay capable of stretching one outrageous image across an entire movie. That was the real challenge facing White Chicks. Two black men impersonate white socialites is an excellent sketch premise because the audience understands it instantly. A feature film demands more. The disguise must create conflict, the conflict must keep changing, and every escape must produce a worse problem than the one before it. The screenplay succeeds less through intricate storytelling than through disciplined escalation. It keeps asking one wonderfully simple question. What is the most uncomfortable situation these men could be forced to survive next? The original story was credited to Keenen Ivory Wayans, Shawn Wayans, and Marlon Wayans. Those three shared screenplay credit with Andy McElfresh, Michael Anthony Snowden, and Xavier Cook, giving the finished film 6 credited screenwriters in total. That crowded writing credit makes sense when you watch the finished movie. It feels assembled through layers. A buddy cop framework, a kidnapping mystery, a social satire, romantic complications, physical comedy set pieces, and dialogue that often plays like polished sketch material. Not every layer fits neatly. Some barely fit at all. Yet the abundance creates momentum. Whenever one comic engine begins running out of fuel, another crashes through the wall. Shawn's initial idea reportedly arrived after he saw Paris and Nikki Hilton on a magazine cover and imagined himself and Marlon portraying women from that celebrity socialite world. Marlon later explained that he first thought the suggestion sounded ridiculous, then immediately understood its potential when he saw the image that had inspired it. That origin shaped the screenplay's most important decision. Brittany and Tiffany Wilson are not written as ordinary women. They are public images with expensive luggage. Their identities consist of recognizable surfaces, designer clothing, exaggerated entitlement, breathy voices, beauty anxiety, and the assumption that everyone nearby already knows who they are. That simplification is strategically useful. Kevin and Marcus do not have to reproduce complete human beings. They must imitate a collection of visible habits. The screenplay, therefore, treats identity like a routine that can be studied, rehearsed, and performed badly under pressure. Every time someone mentions shopping, dieting, dating, friendship, or fashion, the brothers must guess what their characters would say. Sometimes they imitate stereotypes. Sometimes their own personalities burst through. The tension comes from the gap. We know Marcus is underneath Tiffany's face, so even the most ordinary conversation becomes a test he could fail with one wrong gesture. The script's basic structure is remarkably efficient. Kevin and Marcus begin as overconfident FBI agents whose failed undercover operation threatens their careers. Their punishment is a protective assignment involving the Wilson sisters, whose faces are slightly injured in a road accident. When the sisters refuse to attend a major Hamptons event, the agents replace them to save the mission. That chain of events is absurd, but each step supplies a clear motivation for the next. The writers do not waste time proving that the transformation is medically or socially believable. They establish professional desperation, introduce an impossible solution, then move before the audience can examine the logic too closely. Once the brothers reach the hotel, the screenplay shifts from setup to a series of comic traps. The Wilson sisters' friends expect intimacy. Their rivals expect hostility. Latrell Spencer expects romance. Marcus's wife expects honesty. Fellow FBI agents expect evidence. Meanwhile, Kevin begins pursuing reporter Denise Porter while disguised as someone else. Each subplot threatens a different part of the deception. This is classic farce construction. Characters possess incomplete information, doors keep metaphorically slamming, and lies require increasingly elaborate maintenance. The mystery plot may appear to drive the story, but socially the real antagonist is proximity. Kevin and Marcus cannot escape the people who know the women they are pretending to be. The strongest sequences are built around escalation rather than punchlines. Consider the dressing room scene. It begins with a familiar complaint about clothes not fitting. The saleswoman's language becomes increasingly insulting. Marcus responds by turning private frustration into public catastrophe. Emotion rises, physicality expands, and the entire store becomes an audience. The restaurant date with Latrell follows the same pattern. Marcus attempts to repel him through crude behavior, overeating, and deliberate unpleasantness. Every tactic fails because Latrell interprets rejection as attraction. The joke keeps reversing itself. The worse Marcus behaves, the more romantic the evening becomes. That pattern explains why so many lines from the movie survived beyond their original scenes. The dialogue is broad, rhythmic, and designed for repetition. Characters do not merely insult one another, they build theatrical declarations. Conversations become miniature performances, complete with pauses, reversals, and explosive final beats. Real people rarely speak this way. Comedy characters do, especially when the writers understand that delivery will complete what the page begins. A sentence that appears ridiculous in isolation becomes memorable once paired with Marlon's panic, Shawn's composure, or Terry Crews's absolute sincerity. The screenplay does stumble whenever the kidnapping investigation demands serious attention. Clues appear because the plot needs movement, and the eventual conspiracy lacks the comic precision of the social scenes. Yet even that weakness tells us where the writers' enthusiasm lived. They were not fascinated by procedural suspense. They were fascinated by collision, male confidence against female social codes, working-class agents against inherited wealth, and trained investigators against problems no badge can solve. The crime story gets them into the Hamptons. The characters keep them there. And characters this exaggerated cannot be filled by actors chosen only for realism. They require performers who understand rhythm, physical humiliation, and the strange courage needed to make ridiculous behavior feel completely sincere. The screenplay built the playground. Casting would determine who could survive inside it. The screenplay built the playground. Casting determined who could survive inside it. White chicks needed actors willing to perform at completely different levels of reality without tearing the movie apart. Shawn and Marlon Wayans had to treat the central deception like an urgent professional crisis. The socialites around them had to behave as though Brittany and Tiffany's appearances were perfectly ordinary. The FBI characters needed enough seriousness to keep the mission moving. Then Terry Crews had to enter as Latrell Spencer and behave like he had wandered in from an even louder movie. Somehow, these competing energies locked together. The two lead roles were never conventional casting decisions because Kevin and Marcus had been created for Shawn and Marlon. They conceived the story with Keenen Ivory Wayans, co-wrote the screenplay, served as producers, and played both the FBI agents and their socialite identities. Their selection was therefore less about finding actors than designing roles around an existing partnership. By 2004, The brothers had already spent 5 seasons leading the Wayans brothers and had collaborated on films including Scary Movie and its sequel. They knew each other's timing before the cameras rolled. That history gave Keenen something no chemistry test could manufacture: instinctive sibling irritation. Their differences mattered just as much as their connection. Shawn usually projects greater control, making Kevin the brother who believes he can manage every disaster through confidence and improvisation. Marlon is more physically explosive. His face, voice, and entire body seem ready to rebel against the situation, which makes Marcus the ideal victim of the movie's most humiliating complications. Even their female identities reflect that contrast. Shawn's Brittany tries to glide through conversations with calculated composure. Marlon's Tiffany appears seconds away from panic, rage, or both. The casting works because the disguises amplify qualities already present in the performers rather than forcing them into identical comic styles. Around them, Keenen assembled actresses who could make the Hamptons social world feel both ridiculous and internally consistent. Busy Phillips played Karen, Jennifer Carpenter became Lisa, and Jessica Caulfield took the role of Tori, the Wilson sisters' close friends and social translators. Phillips had already appeared in Freaks and Geeks and Dawson's Creek. Caulfield was familiar from the Legally Blonde films. Carpenter, however, was still near the beginning of her screen career, with White Chicks becoming only her fourth on-screen role. These performers do not merely stand around waiting for the leads to deliver jokes. They establish the emotional and conversational rules Kevin and Marcus must imitate. Carpenter's route into the film sounds like something the screenplay might have invented. She later recalled waiting on the Wayans brothers at her restaurant job the day before auditioning. They apparently did not recognize her during the audition, but they cast her anyway, giving the Juilliard-trained actress one of her earliest Hollywood opportunities. That background makes her work as Lisa even funnier. Carpenter had serious theatrical training, yet her signature sequence requires her to collapse inside a boutique because a pair of trousers refuses to cooperate. She plays the meltdown with complete emotional conviction. No smirking, no apology. That commitment turns a shallow complaint into operatic despair. Jamie King and Brittany Daniel were cast as Heather and Megan Vandergeld, giving the story antagonists who could weaponize the same beauty and status culture the heroes were attempting to infiltrate. King brought direct familiarity with fashion culture. She had begun modeling as a teenager and had hosted MTV's House of Style before moving further into acting. Daniel carried a different kind of pop cultural recognition from Sweet Valley High, Dawson's Creek, and Joe Dirt. Their presence sharpens the satire because they look perfectly at home within the world being mocked. They do not play the Vandergeld sisters as secret monsters. They play them as competitors who believe social cruelty is simply good form. The supporting FBI roles were anchored by performers who could lend weight to nonsense. Frankie Faison played Chief Elliot Gordon after years of substantial stage, film, and television work, including a Tony-nominated performance in the original Broadway production of August Wilson's Fences and appearances throughout the Hannibal Lecter film series. Lachlan Munro, playing rival agent Jake Harper, had already worked with the Wayans brothers in Scary Movie. John Hurd brought decades of character actor credibility to Warren Vandergeld. Their casting creates an important illusion. Somewhere beneath the prosthetics, dance battles, and bathroom jokes, an actual criminal investigation is supposedly taking place. Then Terry Crews auditioned, and the movie found its secret weapon. Crews had previously played professional football and was still establishing himself as an actor when he read for Latrell. Earlier that same day, he had auditioned for the Wayans-connected sitcom My Wife and Kids and performed so badly that he left feeling defeated. That failure liberated him. He drove to the White Chicks audition with nothing left to protect, abandoned his inhibitions, and won the role. 2 days later, his agent confirmed that he had lost the television job but landed the film. Catastrophe in one room became freedom in the next. Crews shaped Latrell from athletes he had known during his football career, men obsessed with image, seduction, and their own supposed irresistibility. The genius of the casting lies in contradiction. Cruz looks physically intimidating, but his natural warmth keeps breaking through. Latrell can flex, growl, and pursue Marcus with terrifying confidence, then melt into sincere delight while singing Vanessa Carlton. Marlon later explained that this gap between Cruz's imposing appearance and his teddy bear personality was precisely why the role worked. Latrell is not funny because he knows he is absurd. He is funny because he believes every romantic impulse is magnificent. That balance defines the ensemble. Shawn and Marlon provide practiced sibling rhythm. The three friends create social intimacy. King and Daniel supply polished hostility. Faison, Munro, and Hurd stabilize the criminal plot. Cruz detonates every scene he enters. These actors were not selected to disappear into naturalism. They were chosen because each possessed a readable comic identity that could register instantly inside a crowded farce. Yet casting only places the instruments on stage. The real test comes when the leads must perform through layers of latex, restrictive costumes, painful contact lenses, and characters nested inside other characters, and still make every reaction land. Yet casting only places the instruments on stage. The real test comes when the leads must perform through layers of latex, restrictive costumes, painful contact lenses, and characters nested inside other characters, and still make every reaction land. Shawn and Marlon Wayans are not simply playing Brittany and Tiffany Wilson. They are playing Kevin and Marcus, two FBI agents who are themselves delivering imperfect performances as Brittany and Tiffany. That distinction becomes the film's comic heartbeat. Every feminine gesture is consciously manufactured. Every vocal inflection feels rehearsed, and every sudden burst of masculine aggression threatens to shatter the disguise. The joke is not that they become convincing women. The joke is how desperately they struggle to remain convincing. Shawn plays Kevin as the more confident architect of the scheme. He enters the disguise believing intelligence and improvisation can solve anything, so his Brittany carries a controlled, almost managerial energy. Watch him during the first encounters with the Wilson sisters' friends. His smile stays fixed while his eyes scan the room, collecting information and calculating the safest response. He rarely explodes immediately. He listens, copies the emotional temperature, then delivers whatever answer seems most likely to protect the mission. That restraint makes Kevin the straight man of the partnership, not straight in the absence of comedy, but as the stabilizing performer whose composure gives Marlon something to destroy. Marlon takes the opposite route. Marcus is uncomfortable before the disguise even begins, and Tiffany transforms that discomfort into a full-body crisis. His shoulders tighten. His hands hover awkwardly. His voice climbs higher whenever panic increases, as though the character is physically trying to escape through his throat. Marlon's greatest weapon has always been elasticity. His face stretches, his spine bends, and embarrassment seems to travel through every limb. The prosthetics restrict some of that facial freedom, so he transfers the energy downward. He stomps, recoils, folds himself into defensive poses, then suddenly expands when anger takes over. Even beneath an artificial face, the body remains unmistakably Marlon. The makeup did more than alter their appearance. It became an acting obstacle they had to fight every day. Marlon later said his transformation could require 7 hours in makeup, followed by a long production day and another hour removing it. Shawn remembered the contact lenses feeling like bottle caps glued to his eyelids, saying they could destroy his mood before shooting began. That exhaustion is invisible during the biggest sequences, which makes the performances more impressive than the film's intentionally ridiculous surface suggests. Physical comedy depends on freedom, yet the brothers were working inside masks. They had to generate spontaneity while carrying the discomfort of a costume that never allowed them to forget it was there. Shawn's best moments often involve controlled deception. During the hotel conversations, he uses pauses like emergency brakes. Someone mentions a person Kevin does not recognize. Brittany freezes for half a second, smiles, then redirects. That tiny delay lets the audience see the calculation without making the other characters notice it. His pursuit of Denise adds another layer because Kevin must move between identities and emotional intentions. As himself, he wants to appear charming and competent. As Brittany, he must create opportunities for that male persona without exposing the connection. Shawn plays the contradiction with breezy confidence, which fits Kevin's arrogance, even when the romantic manipulation makes the character difficult to admire. Marlon receives the film's most punishing comic assignment through Marcus's relationship with Latrell Spencer. The restaurant sequence is practically a duet between two opposing performance philosophies. Marcus tries to become repulsive. He chews aggressively, speaks crudely, displays body hair, and treats the date like an act of sabotage. Terry Crews responds with unwavering romantic awe. The harder Marlon pushes Latrell away, the more Crews leans forward. That reversal forces Marlon to keep escalating, and his expression gradually shifts from confidence to disbelief to genuine fear. The scene works because Marcus believes he controls the joke until he realizes he has become its victim. The fitting room meltdown shows a different side of Marlon's technique. It begins with a problem almost everyone recognizes. Clothing refuses to fit, and a sales assistant responds without mercy. Marcus initially tries to preserve the disguise. Then humiliation cracks the performance open. His voice deepens, his posture expands, and Tiffany's polished socialite persona is replaced by the furious man underneath it. The comedy comes from emotional truth pushed beyond reasonable scale. He is not pretending to be upset for a punchline. In that moment, those trousers have become a personal enemy, the assistant has become an oppressor, and the entire boutique must witness the revolution. Absurd? Completely. Emotionally committed? Even more so. The dance battle gives both brothers a chance to perform without hiding their natural coordination. Their characters enter the contest underprepared, surrounded by rivals who embody the polished femininity they have been imitating. Then instinct takes over. Kevin and Marcus stop copying the Wilson sisters and begin moving like themselves, using synchronized steps, athletic timing, and sibling chemistry built through years of working together. The sequence quietly breaks the logic of the disguise because their movements should raise immediate suspicion. Nobody cares. Keenen stages it as a release valve. After spending so much time containing their identities, the brothers finally let their real rhythm burst through the costumes. Their chemistry is strongest when language disappears. A glance between Shawn and Marlon can carry an entire argument. One brother proposes something reckless, the other silently calls him insane, and both understand that they are doing it anyway. That shorthand came from years of performing together on television and film before White Chicks. Their shared history included In Living Color, 5 seasons of The Wayans Brothers, and multiple feature collaborations. The familiarity prevents even the most chaotic exchanges from becoming shapeless. Marlon may explode, but Shawn knows exactly when to interrupt. Shawn may slow a scene down, but Marlon knows when the silence has become ready for destruction. Neither performance aims for delicate transformation. These are broad comic creations built from vocal exaggeration, physical discomfort, sibling rivalry, and the constant danger of exposure. That broadness will repel viewers who need believable disguise work or subtle gender commentary. On the movie's chosen wavelength, however, the commitment is the achievement. Shawn supplies structure. Marlon supplies combustion. Together, they turn 2 pieces of prosthetic makeup into 4 distinct personalities colliding inside the same mission. Still, no comedy duo operates in isolation. Their performance works because an entire ensemble surrounds them, some grounding the deception, some escalating it, and one muscular romantic turning every shared scene into beautiful chaos. Still, no comedy duo operates in isolation. Shawn and Marlon's performances work because an entire ensemble surrounds them, some grounding the deception, some escalating it, and one muscular romantic turning every shared scene into beautiful chaos. The supporting cast understands a rule that many broad comedies forget. Nobody can behave as though the joke is beneath them. Every performer must believe in the emotional reality of the moment, even when that moment involves explosive diarrhea, a public dance battle, or a professional athlete serenading his horrified date with Vanessa Carlton. Terry Crews does not merely steal scenes as Latrell Spencer. He changes the movie's gravitational pull. Before Latrell appears, Marcus fears being exposed. After Latrell appears, exposure almost feels preferable. Crews builds the character from enormous confidence and complete romantic sincerity. Latrell never suspects that his desire might be unwelcome because he interprets every rejection as flirtation. That makes him threatening, ridiculous, and strangely innocent at the same time. A lesser actor would play the role with a knowing wink. Cruise refuses. His expression says he genuinely believes destiny has placed Tiffany Wilson in front of him. The harder Marcus resists, the more Latrell sees proof of chemistry. The 1,000 Miles sequence captures that performance in miniature. Marcus chooses the song because it appears incompatible with Latrell's hypermasculine image. Then Latrell recognizes it immediately. His face brightens. His hands begin keeping time. Within seconds, the intimidating basketball star is singing with the emotional openness of someone alone in his bedroom. The reversal is funny, but Cruise's lack of embarrassment makes it memorable. He does not treat the song as a guilty pleasure. He treats it as an anthem. That wholeheartedness transforms what could have been a disposable music cue into the film's defining cultural afterlife. Busy Phillips, Jennifer Carpenter, and Jessica Caulfield face a quieter but equally important task as Karen, Lisa, and Tori. They must convince us that the fake Wilson sisters are being absorbed into an existing friendship group. Their characters provide the brothers with social information, emotional cover, and a constant threat of discovery. More importantly, the trio creates warmth inside a film built around deception. The conversations are exaggerated, but the actresses play the friendship as genuine. They complain together, compete together, and protect one another when the Vandergeld sisters attack. A contemporary Los Angeles Times review singled out Phillips and Carpenter among the film's stronger impressions, and that judgment still tracks. They make caricatures feel socially alive. Carpenter attacks Lisa's fitting room breakdown with the intensity of a dramatic collapse. The trousers will not close. The saleswoman offers cruelty disguised as assistance, and Lisa's remaining dignity disintegrates. Carpenter lets each insult land before escalating. Disbelief, wounded silence, panic, then total emotional ruin. Phillips takes a different route with Karen. Her sadness is softer and more persistent, especially around Heath, the man she wants but cannot read. Karen could have been nothing more than the group's insecure friend. Phillips gives her a bruised optimism that makes the eventual romantic encouragement from Kevin feel unexpectedly sweet. Caulfield's Tori completes the rhythm by reacting quickly and keeping the group's conversations moving. Jamie King and Brittany Daniel, playing Heather and Megan Vandergeld, supply the opposite energy. The friends create inclusion. The Vandergeld sisters weaponize exclusion. King and Daniel speak with polished contempt, treating humiliation like a competitive sport. Their effectiveness comes from precision. They rarely appear emotionally rattled because social superiority is their natural posture. When the Wilson sisters retaliate, the conflict becomes funny, not simply because insults are exchanged, but because Heather and Megan cannot process the possibility that anyone beneath them might fight back. Their eventual defeat during the dance competition feels like a temporary collapse of the social hierarchy they have spent the movie enforcing. Fawn Chambers adds another tonal lane as Denise Porter. Denise is observant, ambitious, and considerably more grounded than the Hamptons characters surrounding her. That creates a useful irony. Kevin is attracted to the person most professionally equipped to notice inconsistencies, yet he keeps manipulating events to approach her. Chambers does not push for huge comic reactions. Her relative calm gives Shawn room to play Kevin's romantic overconfidence. Meanwhile, Frankie Faison, Lachlan Monroe, and Eddie Velez keep the FBI subplot functioning. Faison delivers Chief Gordon's frustration with institutional authority, while Monroe and Velez play agents Harper and Gomez as rivals who are competent enough to remain dangerous, but foolish enough to belong in this movie. John Hurd performs a similar grounding function as Warren Vandergeld. His established dramatic weight helps disguise how thinly the criminal mystery is constructed. He appears respectable enough to move through elite society without suspicion, which gives the eventual revelation at least a basic foundation. The performance never competes with the comic characters because Hurd understands his job. Maintain the appearance of a legitimate thriller villain while madness unfolds around him. The crime plot needs one person who behaves as though money laundering and kidnapping matter more than shopping insults. Hurd gives it that person. The ensemble's achievement lies in balance. Cruise expands every moment. Phillips, Carpenter, and Caulfield humanize the social world. King and Daniel sharpen its cruelty. Chambers creates romantic calm, while the FBI performers keep one foot planted in procedural comedy. Together, they prevent white chicks from becoming two actors shouting inside expensive makeup. They give the disguises people to attract, deceive, irritate, and unexpectedly befriend. But those relationships still need a physical world convincing enough to contain them. And the film's version of the Hamptons was carefully constructed from luxury hotels, pastel wardrobes, artificial glamour, and costumes that tell jokes before anyone speaks. But those relationships still need a physical world convincing enough to contain them. And White Chicks constructs its version of the Hamptons from polished hotels, pastel clothing, artificial glamour, and faces that seem almost human. Production designer Paul J. Peters, art director Eric Norlin, set decorator Dominique Fouquet-Lemaitre, and costume designer Jory Woodman were responsible for creating the film's luxury playground. Greg Canham and Keith Vanderland handled the makeup effects that made its central deception possible. Those departments were not chasing realism in the strictest sense. They were building a heightened social universe where wealth is instantly readable, femininity is treated as an elaborate costume, and appearances matter more than evidence. The Wilson sisters' transformations dominate the visual design because the entire plot collapses without them. Canham's team began by casting the actors' heads in plaster, creating clay versions of their features, and then developing overlapping foam prosthetic pieces shaped to fit their faces. The challenge was not simply changing skin tone. The makeup had to soften masculine facial structures, conceal hairlines, reshape features, support wigs, and remain flexible enough for exaggerated comedy. Shawn and Marlon then had to perform beneath an artificial surface that covered the very instrument comedians normally rely upon most, the face. The process reportedly took around 5 hours each day, roughly 3 hours for facial makeup, another 90 minutes for body painting, and additional time for wigs and eyes. The wigs were designed to conceal the edges of the prosthetics and help cover the actors' necks and Adam's apples. Blue contact lenses completed the transformation, though Shawn later described them as painfully uncomfortable. The result is technically elaborate and visually uncanny. Their faces appear smooth but immobile, feminine but strangely enlarged. You can see the craftsmanship and the illusion simultaneously. That contradiction becomes part of the film's personality rather than a flaw it successfully hides. And here is what makes the makeup work dramatically. Kevin and Marcus are supposed to look disguised. These are not magical transformations in which the audience forgets the actors underneath. The characters have assembled their appearances under pressure, using FBI resources and questionable confidence. The slight artificiality therefore supports the premise. Every close-up carries danger because their faces resemble expensive masks that might fail under inspection. The film repeatedly places them beside women with natural facial movement, forcing the audience to compare the illusion against reality. The gap is enormous. Somehow, impossibly, the people inside the story accept it. Woodman's costumes extend the same strategy from faces to bodies. Brittany and Tiffany wear fitted tops, short skirts, bright dresses, high heels, oversized accessories, and enough pink to turn every entrance into a declaration. The wardrobe reflects early 2000s celebrity fashion rather than timeless elegance. These outfits belong to the era of tabloid socialites. Tiny handbags, low-rise clothing, glossy fabrics, and conspicuous designer branding. They are not simply clothes. They are social credentials. Kevin and Marcus can enter elite spaces because they wear the correct visual password, even when their behavior immediately exposes how little they understand the culture attached to it. The costumes also create physical obstacles. Marcus's battle with tight trousers turns clothing into an antagonist, while the brothers' struggles with heels transform ordinary walking into stunt work. Their broad shoulders and tall frames are never fully concealed, so the dresses often exaggerate the mismatch instead of minimizing it. Watch how Marlon adjusts his posture when he feels observed. His hips move too deliberately, his arms search for a feminine resting position, and his entire body looks like it is translating instructions a second too late. Costume and performance become inseparable. The clothing does not merely define Tiffany. It constantly reminds Marcus that Tiffany is difficult to maintain. Color separates the film's social factions before the dialogue does. The Wilson sisters and their friends are surrounded by pale pinks, whites, creams, soft blues, and polished metallic details. Their world looks sweet enough to eat and expensive enough to fear touching. Heather and Megan Vandergeld often appear in sharper, more assertive combinations, matching their role as social predators. The FBI scenes, by contrast, favor darker suits, practical interiors, vehicles, and institutional spaces. When Kevin and Marcus move between those environments, the visual joke becomes immediate. Men dressed for surveillance have entered a world where clothing functions as both language and weapon. Although the story takes place largely in New York and the Hamptons, filming occurred in British Columbia, particularly around Vancouver and Victoria. The production used Canadian architecture and landscaped estates to create an American fantasy of East Coast privilege. The Royal Hamptons Hotel is presented less as a functioning hotel than as a social kingdom. Broad entrances, decorative halls, manicured grounds, and enough open space for characters to make public spectacles of themselves. The geography is intentionally simple. Bedrooms conceal schemes, hallways create collisions, restaurants stage humiliation, and outdoor areas become runways for status. The boutique sequence may be the clearest example of production design serving comedy. Mirrors multiply the character's embarrassment. Clothing racks restrict movement. Bright lighting offers nowhere to hide. The fitting rooms become confession booths where insecurity turns volcanic, while the sales floor provides the public audience necessary for the explosion. The design is clean, fashionable, and cruel. Everything in the room exists to make bodies feel judged. When Marcus finally erupts, he is not fighting one assistant. He is fighting an environment engineered to measure him. That is the visual logic running beneath White Chicks. Identity can be purchased, assembled, painted, zipped, and accessorized. The Hamptons characters use clothing and architecture to announce who belongs. Kevin and Marcus infiltrate that hierarchy by copying its surfaces, then repeatedly disrupt it with bodies and personalities the surfaces cannot contain. The production design never asks us to believe in this world completely. It asks us to recognize it instantly. Yet all that polished artifice still has to be photographed, and the camera must decide whether to conceal the disguises, expose them, or turn their unsettling appearance into the center of every frame. Yet all that polished artifice still has to be photographed, and the camera must decide whether to conceal the disguises, expose them, or turn their unsettling appearance into the center of every frame. Cinematographer Steven Bernstein chooses the third option. Rather than burying Shawn and Marlon Wayans beneath darkness, rapid cutting, or carefully protected angles, White Chicks presents them in bright rooms and unforgiving close-ups. Their prosthetic faces become unavoidable. Every smooth cheek, heavy eyelid, and restricted expression sits openly before us. The illusion is never perfect. Bernstein's images understand that perfection would actually weaken the comedy, because the audience must remain aware of the men trapped underneath. Bernstein was already familiar with Keenen Ivory Wayans' comic rhythm, having photographed Scary Movie 2 before returning for White Chicks. He had also shot Patty Jenkins's Monster, released the previous year, a film whose harsh textures and intimate close-ups served a completely different emotional purpose. The contrast says plenty about his adaptability. Monster uses faces as landscapes of pain. White Chicks uses faces as unstable special effects. Bernstein does not impose a grand visual signature on either project. He shapes the photography around what the actors need. Here, clarity beats beauty, reaction beats atmosphere, and the cleanest composition is usually the one that allows a joke to detonate without confusion. The film relies heavily on high-key lighting, meaning scenes are illuminated evenly with relatively little deep shadow. That approach belongs naturally to mainstream studio comedy because viewers need to read expressions quickly, but it carries an extra function here. Shadows could hide the seams of the makeup. Bright light exposes them. Keenan and Bernstein repeatedly place the disguised brothers in hotel lobbies, boutiques, restaurants, and outdoor social events where every feature remains visible. This creates constant visual danger. Kevin and Marcus look as though one suspicious person should identify them immediately. Yet everyone behaves as though the transformation is flawless. The brighter the scene, the more ridiculous the collective blindness becomes. Close-ups are used as pressure chambers. When somebody asks Brittany or Tiffany a question they cannot answer, the camera isolates the brother beneath the disguise and waits for the calculation. A glance shifts, a smile freezes, panic briefly rises through the prosthetics before the character invents another lie. These shots are not visually elegant in a traditional sense, but they are precise pieces of comic information. Bernstein frames the face large enough for us to observe the deception being manufactured in real time. Then the edit cuts to the other person's trusting reaction. Setup, suspense, relief, or disaster. The entire undercover premise can function within that basic exchange. The two shots between Shawn and Marlon are even more important. Keenen frequently keeps both brothers visible so their silent communication can become part of the scene. Shawn holds a polite expression while warning Marlon with his eyes. Marlon reacts too strongly, forcing Shawn to compensate. Because they share the frame, the audience can watch the problem and the attempted solution simultaneously. Cutting between them too aggressively would separate the rhythm. Keeping them together allows sibling chemistry to unfold in real time. Their bodies lean, stiffen, and recoil like parts of one malfunctioning machine. Camera movement remains functional rather than showy. The lens follows characters into rooms, tracks their entrances through social gatherings, and shifts attention whenever a new threat approaches. The movement rarely calls attention to itself because visual spectacle would compete with performance. During dialogue, the compositions are stable enough to let pauses breathe. During physical comedy, the framing widens so bodies can collide with spaces, clothing, furniture, and one another. The boutique meltdown would lose half its force if chopped into facial close-ups. We need to see Marcus battling the trousers, the assistant observing him, and the store becoming a public stage for humiliation. The dance competition briefly loosens that visual restraint. Wider shots display complete choreography, while quicker cuts create momentum as the rivalry escalates. Yet the sequence remains legible. Feet, hips, group formations, and reactions are shown clearly enough for viewers to understand who is winning each exchange. Many comedies ruin dance scenes by cutting so rapidly that editing replaces movement. White Chicks lets the performers carry the energy. The camera may reposition, and the editors may accelerate the tempo, but the sequence still depends on visible bodies executing recognizable actions. Comedy lands because we can see the Wayans brothers abandoning careful impersonation and moving with increasingly reckless confidence. Bernstein also uses the contrast between environments to reinforce the double lives. FBI scenes feel practical and restrained, darker suits, offices, vehicles, and straightforward coverage. The Hamptons material opens into brighter colors, broader spaces, and glossy surfaces. Kevin and Marcus move from a world where observation is professional to one where being observed is social currency. At headquarters, they study suspects. At the hotel, everybody studies clothing, bodies, relationships, and status. The camera reflects that shift by making the brothers visually prominent wherever they go. They may be undercover, but nothing about the photography allows them to disappear. There is little interest in creating geographic realism. The hotel, boutique, nightclub, beach, and restaurant function as comic arenas rather than fully mapped locations. Establishing shots provide just enough orientation, then the camera moves close to the performers. This keeps the movie fast and psychologically simple. Each location represents a new test. Walk correctly here, flirt convincingly there, survive public judgment somewhere else. The image tells us what kind of danger matters before the scene begins. Bright store, body humiliation, romantic restaurant, Latrell. Crowded dance floor, exposure through movement. The cinematography is not the element audiences usually remember from White Chicks, and that may be evidence of how effectively it performs its job. Bernstein gives the actors space, keeps the visual information readable, and refuses to rescue the disguises from their own artificiality. The camera becomes an accomplice in the farce. It sees the obvious truth, but never tells anyone inside the story. What the eye registers as impossible, however, the soundtrack must sell as emotionally immediate, because the film's music and sound effects do far more than decorate the jokes. They frequently become the jokes themselves. What the eye registers as impossible, the soundtrack must sell as emotionally immediate, because music and sound do far more than decorate the jokes in White Chicks. They tell us when a social interaction has become a duel, when Marcus's discomfort has reached critical mass, and when Latrell Spencer is about to turn an ordinary pop song into a declaration of love. The film rarely uses sound subtly. Doors slam, bodies collide, voices leap in pitch, and songs arrive with recognizable hooks. That lack of restraint fits Keenen Ivory Wayans' method perfectly. The soundtrack does not whisper beneath the comedy. It shoves from behind. Teddy Castellucci composed the original music, continuing his connection with the Wayans family after scoring both Scary Movie films. His work here is primarily functional rather than dominant. The score supports pursuit, suspicion, romantic anticipation, and undercover tension without demanding attention away from the performers. When Kevin and Marcus are operating as FBI agents, the music can briefly suggest the momentum of a crime comedy. Once they become Brittany and Tiffany, lighter cues help the movie move between fashion satire, romantic farce, and physical humiliation. Castellucci's score acts like connective tissue, helping wildly different comic modes occupy the same film. But the licensed songs provide the movie's true musical personality. White Chicks belongs completely to the early 2000s, and its soundtrack carries that cultural timestamp with pride. Pop, hip-hop, R&B, and dance music turn the Hamptons into a fantasy of clubs, expensive cars, choreographed rivalry, and celebrity excess. These songs do not merely establish an era. They establish social behavior. Characters recognize one another through taste, movement, and the ability to participate in a shared musical moment. For Kevin and Marcus, every song becomes another undercover examination. Can they dance correctly, react correctly, and perform the identity everyone expects? The dance battle uses music as competitive dialogue. Heather and Megan's group moves first, making skill look effortless and social dominance look choreographed. The Wilson sisters' friends answer, but their routine initially threatens to expose the brothers' limitations. Then Kevin and Marcus stop trying to imitate femininity perfectly and rely on their own coordination. The beat becomes permission. Their FBI identities briefly break through the disguises, not through speech but through rhythm. According to Jamie King, the cast had rehearsed so effectively that Keenen asked them to make their movements less polished and find deliberately awkward white dance choices. The resulting sequence is funny because competence and caricature keep interrupting each other. Nothing in the film's soundscape, however, rivals the use of Vanessa Carlton's "1,000 Miles." The joke begins with expectation. Latrell's size, swagger, and aggressively masculine self-image prepare us for hard-edged musical taste. That delicate piano riff enters instead. Instantly recognizable, completely sincere. Terry Crews does not simply admit that he likes the song. He surrenders to it. His head moves, his expression softens, and his voice joins Carlton's as though the car has become a private concert hall. The comedy depends on contrast, but the scene survives because Crews never treats the music itself as embarrassing. That distinction matters. The movie is not really laughing at 1,000 miles. It is laughing at the narrow assumptions attached to Latrell's appearance. Carlton's song, built around a famously immediate piano hook, carries open-hearted romantic longing. Latrell connects to that longing without shame, which makes him more human precisely when the scene appears to be reducing him to a punchline. The association became so durable that later coverage of the song and Crews's career continued treating the performance as a defining piece of its cultural life. Crews even revisited the number years later on Lip Sync Battle. Voices provide another form of music. Shawn and Marlon construct Brittany and Tiffany through unstable pitch, stretched vowels, breathy enthusiasm, and sudden drops into their natural registers whenever fear or anger takes over. The joke often lands before the sentence is finished because we hear the disguise failing. Marlon's Tiffany voice becomes sharper as Marcus panics. Shawn's Brittany voice stays smoother while Kevin improvises. Around them, the friends speak in rapid waves of gossip and affirmation, while the Vandergeld sisters deliver insults with slow, polished contempt. Every social group has its own tempo. Kevin and Marcus survive by learning the rhythm before someone hears the wrong note. Sound effects push physical comedy beyond what the image could achieve alone. Fabric strains during fitting room disasters. Impacts land with exaggerated force. Bathroom noises are amplified far past realism. The film's crudest sequence turns digestive distress into a complete audio assault, using off-screen sound to make the audience imagine more than the camera needs to show. Sophisticated? Absolutely not. Carefully timed? Yes. A bodily noise arrives, the other characters react, silence creates a brief hope of recovery, and then the next eruption destroys it. The sound editors understand the oldest comic principle in existence. Anticipation makes the impact louder. Even silence becomes useful, though the film deploys it sparingly. Before a lie, there is often a tiny pause. Before Latrell responds to rejection, the soundtrack leaves enough room for Marcus to believe his strategy worked. Before an insult explodes into confrontation, conversation briefly thins out. These gaps are not meditative. They are loaded springs. White Chicks lives in noise, so any sudden absence of noise signals danger. Then the voice, song, or impact arrives, and the pressure releases. The audio landscape is loud, dated, crude, and inseparable from the film's identity. Castellucci's score keeps the story connected, licensed music captures the era, and vocal performance makes deception audible. Most importantly, the soundtrack understands that sincerity can make absurdity funnier than mockery ever could. 1,000 Miles works because Latrell loves it. The dance battle works because everyone wants to win. The screams work because humiliation feels real to the person experiencing it. Creating that energy on screen, however, demanded grueling makeup calls, rewritten choreography, location substitutions, and shooting days that tested how long the illusion could physically survive. Creating that energy on screen demanded grueling makeup calls, improvised dialogue, freezing locations, and shooting days that tested how long the central illusion could physically survive. White Chicks may feel loose and spontaneous, but making it required military-level repetition. Every morning, Shawn and Marlon Wayans had to be rebuilt as the Wilson sisters. Every evening, that construction had to be removed without damaging their skin. Between those rituals, they were expected to perform, rewrite scenes, solve production problems, and remain funny. The finished movie runs on carefree stupidity. The process behind it was anything but carefree. Special makeup creator Greg Canham and his team spent 6 weeks refining the body makeup process before filming. Each brother wore 4 foam latex facial appliances, leaving only the bottom lip exposed. The foam softened their jawlines by making portions of their faces larger, while specially developed acrylic coloring counteracted ashen tones before foundation created the final surface. Full eye contact lenses brightened the whites of their eyes, and long blonde wigs helped conceal the prosthetic edges around their faces and necks. One piece placed slightly off-center could disturb the entire effect, making consistency a daily battle rather than a one-time achievement. The transformation initially took as long as 7 hours and was eventually reduced to approximately 5. Canham recalled repeating it across roughly 60 shooting days, with food and drink creating additional touch-up work. Shawn and Marlon therefore could not simply forget about the makeup once they left the chair. Eating could damage it. Facial movement could strain it. Sweat, weather, and long hours could alter it. The actors were effectively carrying delicate special effects on their faces while being asked to scream, dance, run, eat, and perform broad physical comedy. No wonder the prosthetics occasionally seem under attack. They were. The contact lenses appear to have been the most universally hated element. Both brothers later described them as painfully abrasive, while Marlon remembered the combined experience of wigs, tight clothing, uncomfortable footwear, and lenses as intensely claustrophobic. The wigs entered their mouths during scenes. The shoes changed how they walked. The clothing restricted movement. Then the lenses created pressure inside the one part of their bodies they could not simply ignore. Shawn recalled becoming focused on finishing scenes quickly enough to remove them. The actor's irritation was real. The performance converted it into Marcus and Kevin's escalating frustration. That discomfort was intensified by the production schedule. The movie's sunny Hamptons fantasy was filmed largely during winter in Vancouver, forcing the cast to sell warmth while exposing skin in freezing conditions. Marlon later claimed that he and Shawn sometimes slept only a couple of hours a night across a 65-day period because their responsibilities extended beyond acting. They were also writers and hands-on producers, adjusting material while enduring the makeup routine. Terry Crews remembered the brothers becoming increasingly exhausted and frustrated, only for Keenen to remind them that the idea had been theirs. Brutal. Also fair. Shawn experienced that collision between fantasy and weather during the climactic chase. His character appears to run in stockings without conventional shoes, so the production attached thin soles resembling those from lightweight martial arts slippers beneath his feet. He was chasing a suspect through Canadian cold while dressed as a summer socialite, protected by little more than stockings, hidden soles, and professional commitment. It is exactly the kind of detail viewers never notice because the scene moves too quickly. Behind the camera, however, a ridiculous visual gag had become a practical endurance test. Keenen's set encouraged experimentation even under those pressures. Marlon described the script as a starting framework rather than a sacred document. Once a scripted version had been captured, the performers were invited to try variations, compete with one another, and search for a stronger joke. Shawn remembered continuing to write while still wearing the dresses. That process explains the film's unstable live wire rhythm. Scenes often feel as though they could veer in any direction because the performers were actively testing how far they could stretch them. The preparation created structure. Improvisation supplied danger. Terry Crews embraced that freedom with frightening enthusiasm. On his first day, he had to behave as though Marlon's disguised appearance was irresistibly beautiful. Crews decided that his responsibility was not merely to play Latrell, but to make the audience accept Latrell's attraction. He began treating Marlon as Tiffany even between takes, complimenting the character and maintaining the romantic illusion. That commitment allowed Marlon to react honestly rather than manufacture fear from nothing. Latrell's desire became so aggressive because Crews refused to play it from a safe distance. He pushed into the absurdity and forced Marlon to survive there. Some material pushed too far even for white chicks. Crews recalled an extended dance floor interaction in which Latrell physically lifted and manipulated Marcus during an already uncomfortable encounter. The moment was ultimately removed because the pursuit crossed from outrageous farce into something harsher. That deleted material exposes the production's method. Go beyond the likely boundary, then discover the usable limit during editing. Self-consciousness would have killed Latrell. Total freedom created the performance, while post-production decided which pieces an audience could still laugh at without the sequence becoming genuinely disturbing. The cast also built chemistry away from the formal set. Marlon remembered finding time to socialize despite the exhausting schedule, and the group rehearsed the dance sequence inside an actual nightclub, effectively staging a spontaneous battle among themselves. That off-screen bonding matters because the friendship scenes cannot survive on dialogue alone. Karen, Lisa, Tori, Brittany, and Tiffany must seem like a unit capable of sharing private humiliations one minute and battling rivals the next. The actors' growing clique gave those sequences an ease the makeup could never manufacture. Beneath all the prosthetics and choreography, the ensemble genuinely enjoyed playing together. Crews prepared for 1,000 miles with similar intensity, listening repeatedly to the song and rehearsing gestures alone in his hotel room during periods when he was waiting to shoot. When filming finally arrived, he delivered the complete performance in one take. His head movements, facial shifts, and musical timing had been planned so precisely that Keenen reportedly saw no reason to repeat it. Marlon's startled reactions, meanwhile, remained responsive because Crews added intimate touches during the performance. The scene feels like spontaneous insanity, but its strongest half was privately choreographed for weeks. Preparation created the freedom to appear uncontrolled. That contradiction defines the production journey. The film looks reckless because enormous effort went into making recklessness repeatable. Technicians reconstructed faces to the millimeter. Actors rehearsed apparent improvisations. Canadian winter became Hamptons summer. Exhausted writer-producers kept inventing jokes while trapped inside their own creation. The process nearly overwhelmed Shawn and Marlon, yet the discomfort became fuel rather than visible defeat. They had made an outrageous bet on a premise few films would attempt. The next question was whether audiences would reward that suffering, and whether a comedy rejected by most critics could turn its $37 million gamble into a genuine commercial hit. They had made an outrageous bet on a premise few studio comedies would attempt. The next question was whether audiences would reward that suffering, and whether a movie rejected by most critics could turn its costly disguises into a genuine commercial hit. The answer was yes, though not in the form of a record-breaking blockbuster. White Chicks did something more valuable for its long-term reputation. It opened solidly, survived beyond the initial curiosity, and earned enough worldwide to prove that the Wayans family's comic instincts connected with viewers whom professional reviewers were largely failing to represent. Sony released the film domestically on Wednesday, June 23, 2004, positioning it inside the competitive summer season. During its first traditional weekend, it earned 19,676,748 sounds from 2,726 theaters, an average of approximately $7,218 per location. It finished in second place behind Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11, which became the weekend's unexpected #1 release, despite playing in far fewer theaters. Including the Wednesday and Thursday grosses, White Chicks had already collected about $27.18 million by Sunday night. That was not an explosive launch, but it was a strong opening for an original comedy whose central attraction consisted of two actors hidden beneath deliberately unnatural makeup. The competition surrounding that opening makes the result more revealing. Fahrenheit 9/11 was generating political controversy and historic documentary numbers, while The Notebook was beginning a theatrical run that would later grow into its own cultural phenomenon. White Chicks had neither urgent political relevance nor best-selling romantic source material. It was selling the Wayans name, an instantly understandable visual premise, and the promise of broad comedy. Nearly $20 million over 3 days meant audiences understood the assignment. They were not entering theaters expecting subtle social commentary. They wanted disguises, humiliation, and Terry Crews discovering the emotional power of Vanessa Carlton. The second weekend brought a steep 55.9% decline, reducing the film's 3-day earnings to approximately $8.67 million. That drop suggests the initial concept generated considerable front-loaded interest, with fans of the Wayans brothers arriving early. Yet the movie did not disappear after that fall. It eventually reached $70,831,760 domestically, meaning the opening weekend accounted for only about 28% of its North American total. The numbers calculates a domestic legs multiplier of 3.51, the final gross divided by the opening weekend, which indicates that the film continued attracting viewers beyond its first wave. Bad reviews may have dominated the conversation, but they did not stop the run. International audiences added roughly $42.27 million, bringing the worldwide theatrical total to approximately $113.1 million. About 6% of that figure came from the domestic market, while international territories supplied the remaining 37.4%. That balance makes sense for a comedy heavily dependent on American celebrity stereotypes, verbal delivery, and early 2000s racial and gender codes. Humor based on dialogue and cultural recognition does not always travel as easily as action or visual spectacle. Even so, more than $42 million outside North America showed that the central image required little translation. 2 FBI agents trapped inside an impossible disguise is understandable almost anywhere. The production budget requires caution because major box office databases disagree. Box Office Mojo reports an estimated cost of $37 million, while the numbers lists $20 million. The higher figure has become the one most frequently associated with the film, and it appears plausible given the prolonged prosthetic work, ensemble cast, location requirements, and 60-plus day production. Using $37 million, the worldwide gross reached just over 3 times the production budget. Using $20 million, the ratio becomes considerably stronger. Neither calculation represents pure profit, because theaters retain part of ticket revenue and studio spending includes distribution and marketing costs not reflected in the production budget. Still, the theatrical outcome was clearly healthy. The film earned almost twice its widely reported $37 million budget from the domestic market alone before international revenue was counted. It also reached a worldwide total high enough to validate the premise commercially without requiring franchise-level attendance. This mattered because White Chicks was not based on an established property. There was no novel, television series, toy line, or previous installment guaranteeing recognition. Its marketable property was the Wayans family itself, their audience, their comic reputation, and their willingness to appear ridiculous in ways more cautious stars would avoid. Its real commercial life also extended beyond theaters. The film arrived during the peak era of DVD rentals, physical media ownership, cable reruns, and repeat viewing among younger audiences. Publicly accessible sources do not provide a dependable complete total for its home entertainment revenue, so assigning a specific figure would be speculation. The cultural evidence, however, is visible in what survived. Quoted dialogue, replayed scenes, the dance battle, Latrell's date, and 1,000 Miles. The theatrical run made the movie financially viable. Repetition made it permanent. That distinction is essential. Plenty of films open bigger and vanish faster. White Chicks earned $113.1 million worldwide, but its cultural footprint eventually became larger than that number suggests. The box office proved there was an audience. Home viewing allowed that audience to memorize it. Critics, however, saw something very different, and the enormous divide between professional contempt and audience affection would become one of the most revealing chapters in the film's history. Critics, however, saw something very different, and the divide between professional contempt and audience affection became one of the most revealing chapters in the film's history. White Chicks was not merely reviewed poorly. It was often treated as evidence of everything wrong with mainstream comedy. Lazy stereotypes, endless bodily humor, unbelievable plotting, and a running time far too generous for such a fragile premise. More than 2 decades later, Rotten Tomatoes records only 15% positive reviews from 125 critics. Metacritic gives it 41 out of 100 from 31 reviews. Those numbers do not describe mild disappointment. They describe broad rejection. The complaints were not invented. The kidnapping story barely survives scrutiny. The disguises require every supporting character to become selectively blind, and several sequences continue long after delivering their strongest joke. Critics also questioned what the movie was saying beneath its racial and gender reversals. One Metacritic-listed review argued that a film beginning with race, class, and sexual stereotypes remained disappointingly shallow, while another complained that its racial material led nowhere. Even reviewers who admitted laughing often described the experience as messy, crude, or structurally undisciplined. The movie throws everything at the screen: farce, romance, bathroom comedy, social satire, and accepts the wreckage as part of the show. Roger Ebert gave the film 1.5 stars, objecting to its conventionality and broad reliance on stereotypes. That criticism identifies the central contradiction of White Chicks. Its premise looks dangerous, yet much of its storytelling is extremely familiar. Beneath the racial transformation sits an old disguise farce. Beneath the gender comedy sits the same mistaken identity machinery used by Some Like It Hot, Tootsie, and countless theatrical comedies before them. The Wayans brothers changed the cultural ingredients, but they did not reinvent the recipe. For critics expecting the provocative image to produce equally provocative insight, the film's dependence on established formulas felt like creative retreat. Yet the reviews were not unanimously hostile. Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times argued that the movie worked as a sustained assumed identity farce, praised the brothers' physical comedy, and recognized unexpected compassion in the treatment of Karen, Lisa, and Tori. He also singled out Terry Crews, Busy Phillips, and Jennifer Carpenter while acknowledging that the movie ran too long. Variety's David Rooney offered a similarly practical judgment. As lowbrow comedy, it delivered what it promised. Those positive reactions understood the film less as sophisticated satire than as performance-driven chaos. The question was not whether the story made sense. The question was whether the performers could keep selling it. Awards culture responded with ridicule rather than recognition. White Chicks received 5 Golden Raspberry nominations, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, Worst Screenplay, Worst Screen Couple, and a shared Worst Actress nomination for Shawn and Marlon Wayans. It won none of them, but the nominations cemented its position among 2004's most publicly mocked releases. The gendered category itself became part of the joke. 2 male performers were nominated as actresses for playing men impersonating women. That may sound perfectly tailored to the Razzies, though it also reduced the physical difficulty of the performances to a novelty gag, the same limitation that shaped much of the film's initial reception. Audience scoring tells a less brutal story. Rotten Tomatoes currently shows a 55% audience score from more than 250,000 ratings, while Metacritic's users give it 6.8 out of 10. IMDb's weighted score sits at 5.9 from roughly 197,000 users. None of those figures makes White Chicks universally beloved. They do show that ordinary viewers have been consistently more forgiving than critics, especially considering how often the film is revisited, quoted, and shared. This is not a hidden masterpiece uncovered by popular democracy. It is something stranger, an uneven comedy whose successful scenes proved far more durable than its failures. That durability arrived through repetition. Television broadcasts, DVDs, streaming libraries, short online clips, and social media separated individual moments from the film surrounding them. Viewers no longer needed to sit through the kidnapping exposition to revisit the boutique meltdown. They could ignore the romantic subplot and jump directly to the dance battle. Most importantly, Latrell's performance of 1,000 Miles developed a life far beyond the original scene. The song became deeply associated with Terry Crews' delighted sing-along, resurfacing through uploads, remixes, reaction clips, and later performances. The internet effectively re-edited White Chicks into a collection of its strongest comic memories. Entertainment Weekly's 2020 Oral History openly described the movie as a surprise summer classic and cult favorite, language that would have seemed unlikely beside its original reviews. That reevaluation did not occur because the weak mystery suddenly became clever, or the stereotypes became less questionable. It occurred because audiences formed emotional attachments to the ensemble's commitment. Terry Crews made Latrell lovable. The female friendship group gave the film warmth. Shawn and Marlon's discomfort became familiar rather than grotesque. Viewers remembered how specific scenes made them feel, usually loud, helpless laughter, more vividly than they remembered whether the screenplay functioned as a coherent whole. The cultural debate remains complicated. Some viewers see the movie's willingness to mock nearly everyone as comic freedom. Others see racial caricature, misogyny, homophobic panic, and jokes whose targets are difficult to defend. Both responses are supported by the film itself. White Chicks can recognize the pressure women face around beauty while making women's bodies the subject of crude humor. It can puncture white privilege while relying on simplified ideas of whiteness. It can make Latrell unexpectedly tender while treating his attraction to Marcus as a source of fear. The film is generous and careless, sometimes in the same scene. That tension explains why the reputation never settled into simple agreement. Critics were right about the weak structure, shallow commentary, and exhausting excess. Audiences were right that certain performances and set pieces are explosively funny. White Chicks survives not because every criticism was unfair, but because criticism could not erase the pleasure viewers found inside its mess. Its legacy now rests in that contradiction. To understand why the movie remains recognizable after so many cleaner comedies disappeared, we have to confront what lies beneath the disguises. Its ideas about identity, privilege, friendship, performance, and the strange freedom that comes from temporarily becoming someone else. To understand why White Chicks remains recognizable after so many cleaner comedies disappeared, we have to confront what lies beneath the disguises. Its ideas about identity, privilege, friendship, performance, and the strange freedom that comes from temporarily becoming someone else. Full spoilers ahead, although the mystery matters far less than the transformation surrounding it. Kevin and Marcus begin the movie convinced that identity is something they can control. They are trained undercover agents. Pretending is their profession. Yet the Wilson sister assignment exposes how shallow that confidence is. They can copy appearances quickly. Understanding the lives attached to those appearances takes much longer. The film's central theme is identity as performance. Nearly everyone in the Hamptons is acting, even without prosthetics. The Wilson sisters perform celebrity. Heather and Megan perform superiority. Warren Vandergeld performs financial respectability while hiding criminal desperation. Latrell performs invincible masculinity, only to reveal a sentimental interior through music and romantic fantasy. Kevin performs confidence because admitting uncertainty would threaten his self-image. Marcus performs professional calm while his marriage deteriorates under the weight of secrecy. The disguises are outrageous, but they only make visible what every character is already doing, constructing a version of themselves for other people to believe. That idea gives the makeup effects a thematic purpose beyond the initial joke. Brittany and Tiffany's faces are visibly artificial, yet their social status makes everyone accept them. People do not see what is physically in front of them. They see wealth, reputation, clothing, and expectation. The supposed Wilson sisters enter spaces without being questioned because privilege acts as a second disguise. Their names open doors that Kevin and Marcus could not enter as themselves. The film never develops this observation into a sustained critique of race or class, but the mechanism is there. Belonging is not presented as moral worth. It is presented as successful branding. The gender comedy is more conflicted. Kevin and Marcus experience tight clothing, painful beauty routines, unwanted attention, body judgment, and the emotional codes governing female friendship. Marcus in particular discovers what it feels like to have another person ignore clear rejection and treat his body as an object of entitlement. The movie briefly creates empathy through discomfort. The brothers cannot fully understand women's experiences until those experiences become physical and unavoidable. Yet the same film also treats female insecurity, menstruation, dieting, and bodily functions as broad punchlines. It recognizes pressure while exploiting it. Insight arrives, then a toilet joke kicks down the door. Marcus's relationship with Latrell contains the film's sharpest version of that contradiction. Latrell's pursuit lets Marcus experience the fear of being desired by someone physically stronger who refuses to recognize boundaries. That fear has genuine social meaning. But the film also frames male-on-male attraction, even attraction based on deception, as a source of escalating panic. The ending protects Marcus's heterosexual identity by allowing Latrell to reject him after the truth is exposed. "I knew there was something wrong with you," the scene effectively argues, before Latrell redirects his interest toward the real Wilson sisters. The movie approaches a provocative reversal, feels the heat, then retreats into conventional reassurance. Friendship receives warmer treatment. Karen, Lisa, and Tori initially appear to be stereotypes of shallow, rich women, but Kevin and Marcus gradually discover vulnerability beneath the gossip and designer clothing. Karen wants affection. Lisa is wounded by beauty standards. Tori wants loyalty. The brothers begin by using these women as cover for an operation, then risk the mission to defend them during the fashion confrontation and dance battle. That shift matters. Their impersonation becomes emotionally real not because they perfect the voices or clothing, but because they begin behaving like actual friends. The identities are false. The loyalty is not. The finale resolves the crime plot with little elegance. Warren's scheme is exposed, the kidnapped women are rescued, guns appear, and the FBI agents finally return to open action. Yet the more satisfying resolution happens afterward, when Kevin and Marcus reveal the truth to the friends they deceived. The women are understandably furious. Then they choose to preserve the friendship anyway, asking whether they can continue spending time together as themselves. Logically, this forgiveness arrives far too quickly. Emotionally, it completes the film's most generous idea. Connection can survive the collapse of performance when something sincere existed inside it. Within Keenen Ivory Wayans' career, White Chicks represents both the strength and limitation of his comic philosophy. He understands instantly readable premises, fearless performers, escalating embarrassment, and the value of attacking respectability. His direction encourages commitment rather than caution. At the same time, the film lacks the tighter satirical focus of In Living Color at its best, or the genre precision that made the first Scary Movie feel like a concentrated parody. White Chicks sprawls. It repeats itself. Its 109-minute running time often feels generous to material that would have benefited from sharper cutting. And yet, rewatchability does not always belong to the most disciplined movie. Sometimes it belongs to the film containing 5 scenes people cannot stop repeating: the boutique breakdown, the dance battle, the dinner with Latrell, the car sing-along, the climactic fashion confrontation. These sequences survive independently because they are built around performance rather than plot information. You can enter them without remembering the investigation and still understand the comic stakes immediately. That modular quality made White Chicks ideal for television, physical media, streaming, clips, memes, and group viewing. Its weaknesses fade between rewatches. Its strongest moments keep arriving fully charged. The movie is best suited to viewers who enjoy broad physical comedy, aggressive farce, early 2000s pop culture, and performers willing to sacrifice dignity for a reaction. Anyone seeking subtle commentary, convincing realism, or carefully restrained humor will probably find it exhausting. Both responses are fair. The film is too careless to be defended as secretly sophisticated, but too distinctive to dismiss as merely bad. Its cultural survival was not an accident. Audiences recognized comic commitment even when critics recognized structural failure. My final verdict: White Chicks is a deeply uneven comedy with a flimsy mystery, dated attitudes, and moments that push discomfort past their natural limit. It is also fearless, quotable, strangely affectionate, and carried by performers who commit so completely that isolated scenes approach comic immortality. As a complete film, it earns 7 out of 10. As a collection of unforgettable comic moments, it scores higher. The disguise was never convincing. The laughter was. And more than 20 years later, that is the identity the movie cannot remove. The disguise was never convincing. The laughter was. And the reason becomes clearer when you examine how White Chicks constructs its most memorable sequences. The movie's plot is loose, but its individual comic set pieces are often engineered with surprising discipline. Each begins with a simple social objective, introduces one destabilizing element, and then prevents the characters from escaping until humiliation becomes unavoidable. Kevin and Marcus rarely enter a scene trying to be funny. They are trying to survive. That desperation gives the comedy shape. The audience knows the disguise could collapse at any moment, so even a conversation about shopping carries the tension of a bomb disposal sequence. The boutique scene is a perfect example. Marcus needs to try on clothes without revealing his body, maintain Tiffany's personality, and avoid attracting suspicion. 3 manageable goals. Then the trousers refuse to fit. The saleswoman responds with professional cruelty, treating Marcus's body as a defective object rather than a customer's source of embarrassment. The scene escalates through recognizable stages: denial, effort, humiliation, rage, public explosion. Every step makes the next one inevitable. Marlon Wayans does not jump immediately to screaming because the scream needs pressure beneath it. By the time he erupts, the audience has already felt every insult tighten around him like the trousers themselves. The restaurant date with Latrell follows the same escalation pattern, but reverses the expected result of every action. Marcus believes disgust will create distance. He eats aggressively. Latrell admires his appetite. He displays body hair. Latrell becomes more fascinated. He behaves crudely. Latrell interprets confidence. Comedy often depends on a character's plan failing, but this sequence goes further. Each failure strengthens the exact problem Marcus is trying to solve. That is why his panic grows so effectively. He is not merely losing control. he is accidentally seducing the person he wants to repel. Terry Crews's performance gives the scene its second rhythm. Marlon pushes outward through fear. Crews pulls inward through attraction. One actor expands into physical resistance, while the other becomes softer, more enchanted, and more emotionally available. The contrast creates a duet. Crews never treats Latrell as stupid. Latrell understands what he wants perfectly. He simply misreads every signal Marcus sends. That sincerity keeps the sequence from becoming a collection of disconnected, gross-out jokes. Beneath the absurdity sits a recognizable romantic structure. One person believes the evening is magical, while the other is silently begging for rescue. The 1,000 Miles sequence works because it compresses the same principle into less time. The setup relies on expectation. Latrell's body, voice, and public image suggest one type of musical taste. Marcus chooses a delicate piano-driven pop song as a test. Then the opening notes play, and Latrell's entire identity appears to open. The punchline is not merely that he knows the song, he loves it without reservation. His pleasure is so complete that Marcus loses the emotional advantage. What began as mockery becomes exposure. Latrell is comfortable enough to reveal softness, while Marcus remains trapped inside layers of performance. The dance battle transforms social conflict into physical storytelling. Heather and Megan control the room because they understand its rules. Their movement is coordinated, polished, and socially approved. Kevin and Marcus initially attempt to respond within those same expectations, but their bodies resist the disguise. Eventually, they abandon imitation and use their natural rhythm. The sequence becomes funny because success itself threatens them. The better they dance, the less believable Brittany and Tiffany become. Victory and exposure move in the same direction. The brothers win the social contest by temporarily forgetting the mission that placed them there. Even the film's crudest bathroom material follows structural rules. A private bodily crisis becomes public through sound. One character attempts concealment. Another reacts. Silence creates hope. Then the next noise destroys it. The jokes are juvenile, but the timing is not accidental. Keenen Ivory Wayans understands that bodily comedy depends on anticipation and reaction more than the bodily event itself. Viewers laugh because the characters know someone else can hear them. Shame turns noise into narrative. The fashion show climax is less precise because it must resolve too many subplots at once, yet it still relies on public performance. The characters who have spent the movie-building appearances are exposed before an audience. Warren's respectable image collapses. Kevin and Marcus abandon their female identities. The friendship group discovers that emotional intimacy was created through deception. Guns and kidnappers provide conventional action, but the deeper climax is visual. Masks fall away, social positions change, and everyone must decide which relationships remain real. That pattern explains why the film's strongest scenes function independently from the plot. Each has a complete internal journey. A goal is established. Pressure rises. The character chooses the wrong solution. The wrong solution creates a larger problem. Then performance carries the sequence beyond logic and into memory. Viewers may forget the details of Warren Vandergeld's criminal scheme, but they remember Marcus fighting trousers because the emotional construction is cleaner than the mystery. White Chicks is therefore stronger as a collection of comic machines than as one continuous narrative. Its best sequences have entrances, reversals, crescendos, and exits. They can be quoted, clipped, replayed, and understood without explanation. That portability became essential to the movie's afterlife. But memorable scenes alone do not automatically create a cult classic. Something deeper must happen. Audiences must begin treating the film not merely as entertainment, but as shared language. Memorable scenes alone do not automatically create a cult classic. Something deeper must happen. Audiences must begin treating the film not merely as entertainment, but as shared language. That is what happened to White Chicks. Its dialogue became reaction material. Its songs became callbacks. Its facial expressions became visual shorthand for disgust, panic, confidence, and social warfare. People who had not watched the entire movie in years could still recognize the boutique meltdown or complete a quoted line. The film stopped existing only as a 109-minute comedy and began existing as a collection of communal memories. Cult status usually develops around imperfection. A flawlessly constructed film can be admired, but messy films invite participation. Viewers debate the weak parts, defend the embarrassing parts, and form attachments to moments that critics dismissed. White Chicks creates that kind of relationship because its pleasures are excessive and specific. Loving it requires accepting the makeup, the implausibility, the dated jokes, and the tonal chaos. That acceptance becomes part of the viewing experience. The audience does not overlook the absurdity. It joins it. Group viewing strengthens that bond. The movie rewards anticipation. Once viewers know what is coming, the buildup becomes part of the joke. They wait for the piano introduction to 1,000 Miles. They recognize the moment before Marcus explodes in the boutique. They know Latrell will interpret every insult as seduction. Rewatching replaces surprise with ritual. Laughter begins before the punchline because the audience remembers not only the joke, but the reaction it produced the first time. The film becomes less like a story and more like a familiar performance everyone in the room knows. Its early 2000s identity also gives it nostalgic force. The fashion, music, celebrity culture, and tabloid obsession belong to a recognizable media era. The Wilson sisters reflect a period when socialites became famous through wealth, nightlife, public appearances, and relentless photography before modern influencer culture fully reorganized that attention. The movie's technology, slang, clothing, and attitudes now function almost like period details. They were contemporary in 2004. Today they create a time capsule filled with low-rise fashion, glossy pop production, and comedy unconcerned with surviving future standards. That last point is central to its modern reputation. Many jokes have aged badly. The film uses gender panic, racial caricature, bodily shame, and sexual aggression with little hesitation. Rewatching it now creates friction because audiences may laugh at a performance while rejecting the assumption beneath the joke. That discomfort does not automatically erase the comedy, but it changes the conversation around it. Viewers are more likely to ask who is being mocked, whose fear is treated as funny, and whether the film understands the experiences it borrows. Yet White Chicks also resists simple condemnation because its targets constantly shift. Wealthy white women are mocked, but their friendship becomes emotionally important. Hypermasculinity is exaggerated through Latrell, but he receives some of the movie's most tender moments. Kevin and Marcus exploit female identities, yet their time inside those identities forces them to recognize forms of judgment and vulnerability they previously ignored. The satire lacks a consistent moral center. That inconsistency can feel careless, but it also prevents the film from becoming a one-directional attack. Any attempt to recreate its success would face a difficult problem. The premise depended on a specific cultural moment, a specific family's comic sensibility, and performers willing to endure extraordinary physical discomfort. Repeating the disguise would not be enough. Audiences already know the image. The shock has faded. A continuation would need a new source of social tension while preserving the chemistry, musical spontaneity, and escalating farce that made the original memorable. Too much caution would drain the comedy. Too little awareness would make the result feel trapped in 2004. The greatest challenge would be Latrell. Terry Crews created a character whose popularity exceeded his narrative importance. Bringing him back without repeating the same pursuit would require genuine development. Repeating 1,000 Miles would generate recognition, but recognition is not the same as invention. The original scene worked because no one expected it. A recreation would arrive carrying 20 years of expectation. The filmmakers would need to understand why the moment worked: sincerity, contrast, emotional openness, rather than simply replaying its visible ingredients. The same is true of Shawn and Marlon. The original performances were funny because the actors appeared trapped inside the identities they had created. A later version could not rely only on makeup and voices. It would need to show how Kevin and Marcus have changed, what they still misunderstand, and why returning to disguise would create new emotional pressure. Comedy sequels often mistake repetition for continuity. The best continuation would treat the original as a foundation rather than a checklist. Whether or not the characters ever return White Chicks already possesses the form of immortality most comedies actually seek. It is remembered in fragments of sound and movement. A piano riff begins, and viewers see Terry Crews behind a steering wheel. Someone complains about clothing, and Marlon's fury reappears. A dance floor opens, and the Vandergeld rivalry returns. These associations are stronger than plot because they have fused with audience memory. That is the final measure of the film's legacy. White Chicks was never elegant enough to become a critical landmark or coherent enough to become a model screenplay. It became something more unruly, a flawed comedy that audiences adopted, repeated, and carried forward without permission from cultural gatekeepers. Its rough edges remain visible. So does the craftsmanship behind its best scenes. The movie survives between those truths, too careless to call timeless, too memorable to leave behind. The prosthetics eventually came off. The sets were dismantled, the reviews were published, and the theatrical run ended. But Latrell is still singing, Marcus is still trapped in those trousers, and an entire generation can hear the next line before it arrives. That is not perfection. It is permanence.